Hello everyone, welcome back to my Python programming course. This is chapter number 2 and today we are going to learn all about variables. All right? And I also have a question for you at the end of this video that I would love for you to solve and comment down the answer. All right? So keep watching. So what are variables? Variables are objects that are used to store data. Okay, how can you define these variables? So you first have to write the variable name and then equals to and then the value that you want to assign to it. So a simple example would be if I want to define a variable, if I want to write down age of someone, so I can do age, where I can have the variable name as age, and then I can assign a value, so say age 21. Okay, variables are actually case sensitive. All right, so for example, if you have age with a small a and then you have age another variable with a capital A, then both the variables are actually different. They are not the same. Now there are four types of variables out there in Python. So the first one is integer. These are non-fractional numbers. The second is float, which are actually fractions or decimals. The next is string. String is basically collection of characters, and you can declare or define strings using single quotes or double quotes. And the last one we have is Boolean. Boolean are actually binary values, which are actually just true or false. Now let's move on to our Visual Studio Code and see some examples in action there. Here I have the variable age and then I have assigned 21 to it. So that is how you define variables. Okay. And we just talked about variables are case sensitive, correct? Now, how do we test that? So I have taken the same example where I have age 21 and then I have another age with capital A and it is 22. So how do we check that they are not the same thing? So if I go in and I print age, if I do that and if I click on run, you see that it prints 21. That means that it is printing the age associated with this particular variable. If I go in and I change it to age and I go and run it, now if you see, it is actually outputting 22. So that means that we can confirm that variables are case sensitive, and you have to be extra careful when you define variables and how you use them, because sometimes we usually make the mistake of declaring the wrong variable and using the wrong one. Okay, so let's look at the variable types now. So the first one for us is integer. Now, integer is something that can be, non-fractional or the whole number, where, for example, players can be 11. If you are in a football game, you'll say there are 11 players. You will never say there are 10 and a half, 11 and a half players, correct? So that is a good example for integers. Now, another example is seats. So there can be 5 seats, there can be 3 seats, 2 seats. There cannot be 3.5 seats or 4.5 seats unless you are traveling in Mumbai local, because there we have 3.5 seat, which we actually call fourth seat. So if I want to go ahead and if I want to print that out, so if I go in and say players and if I execute it, you can see that it prints 11. Okay, it's also printing 22. So I'm going to quickly go up and comment out that print statement so that we have clear outputs. Okay, so coming back to integers. So you see that when I did a print players, it actually went ahead and printed 11. Now, if I want to make it look pretty, right? We are learning here. So if I say, if I go into the print statement and I do something called number of players equal to, just gonna get rid of this. So if I do that, this is how you can print things in Python. You can do number of players equal to, and then if you when you provide comma, you can write the variables here. What it will do is it will take in this particular string and then it will print players here. So if I run this, it will say, you can see number of players equal to 11. Okay, I can do same thing with seats. I can say there are number of, I can just do number of seats. And then if I go ahead and write seats here, if I execute it, you can see number of seats equal to 5. So that's how you can play around with integers. The next thing that we want to look at is float. Now float is something which is a decimal, so it can be, distance, say 1.5 miles, or GPA. You can have 3.5 GPA, you can have 3.0 GPA. Remember that in float there has to be a decimal. It can be 3.0, that doesn't make it a integer. If you have a decimal point, that makes it a float. So we can do similar thing. We can see, we can try to print it. So we can say my GPA is, so I can say my GPA is, and if I provide the GPA value, and if I go in and execute it, you can see that my GPA is 3.5. So it's actually taking in this value of 3.5 and it is printing it here. Okay, so that is what a float is. The third thing, pretty simple, right? The third variable type we have is a string. Now, string can be a collection of characters. Now, these characters can be anything. These can be alphabets, these can be numbers, alphanumeric characters. It can be anything. It can also be a space. So, if you look at the first example that I have here, name equal to pseudocoder Ravina. And here, if you see, there is a space here. So, do you think it's correct? Yeah, it is correct. So if I go ahead and if I print the name and if I click on run, you can see that it prints out pseudocoder Ravina. If you look at the second example here, which says email, you'll notice that I have numbers in here. I have alphanumeric characters in here. I also have, dot. So I have collection of everything. So that is what is. If I go ahead and print email, you'll see that it now prints my email. Okay, so that is what is a string. Now let's move on to the last variable type that we have is a boolean. Now boolean can actually be just two values. It can either be true or it can either be false. Booleans usually are declared to have some kind of decision making, right? So it will be usually defined as, is running. So it can either be true or false. Is someone is running? So yes or no. You can ask, is it cold? You can either say yes or you can either say no, right? So that's why that's how booleans are used. So so we can just try it out. We can say something like, if is cold. If it is cold, then we can print that Chicago is cold. And otherwise, what we can print is Chicago is not cold. So what's happening here is you don't need to know if and else. We are going to go through everything, but that is just one thing that I want to, execute and show you the power of booleans. So you can see that I'm checking if it is cold, then I want to print Chicago is cold. Otherwise, I want to print Chicago is not cold. So if I go ahead and run it, right now is cold is what? False. So it should print Chicago is not cold, which is correct. Now, if I go ahead and I change it to true and I run it again, then it prints Chicago is cold. So that's how usually booleans are used. They are used to make a decision. They seldom start with, is cold, is running, and that is actually the right way to define them. Next topic that we are going to look at is actually variable reusability. Okay, so variables are reusable. So for example, here I have age equal to 21. If I go ahead and print that age, if I do that, you see that it prints 21. I can also check the type of that variable. So how do we do that? We do print we write type, and then we write the variable name inside the type, so age. When I do that and click on run, you can see that it prints class of int, which is integer. So currently this age variable is of type integer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to change it. I'm going to change the age to you are old, which is a string. Now if I go ahead and print that, so I'm going to copy it. Actually, I'm going to cut it, and then so you see that I reused this variable age. I did not create a new one. So what should happen? So what happens in Python is if you have a variable and if you overwrite it, so currently that variable was an integer. Previously that variable was an integer, and now if you see it has been assigned a string. So what will happen? It will actually get assigned as a string value, so that age will now become a string. So if I go ahead and print that age and the type of the age, if I click on execute, you can see that now when I print age, it is saying you are old, and the type of that particular variable has now converted to a string. So that is variable reusability. You can use the same variable. You don't need to you know um, make a new variable and typecast and then do that. No, you can, once you declare a variable, you can assign it any value, and at any point of time you can change that value, and you can change the type of that variable at any point of time. The next topic and the last topic that we have is casting. Now, if I have, say, a variable called age, which is of type integer, and I want to actually convert it to a type float. So how can I do that? What I have to do is I have to write the variable type that I want, so float, and in parentheses I have to give the variable that I want to convert, so age. So when I do that, and I can do, to make it simpler, I can do float age. So when I do that and I convert that to float age, I will go ahead and print it, so float age, and I'm also going to print the type of float age. So what should happen now is that uh, this particular integer should be converted to a float and assigned to this integer. Okay, if I go ahead and run it, you can see that float age is giving me 21.0 because we casted it to float. And the if we check the type of it, it is saying class float. So that is actually typecasting. I have a take home question for you guys. Okay, so let's see if you really understood all these concepts. Okay, so the take home question is that you have two variables. Variable one is welcome to, which is a string, and then there is another variable, variable two, which is 2024, and it is an integer. I want you to create a third variable using these two variables such that the third variable's value is welcome to 2024 as a string. Now, let me know in the comments below the answer that you come up with. I hope this explanation was helpful. The next chapter that we have is data structures. I know you all are eagerly waiting for it. So it will be published next Thursday. And I hope you like this lecture. Thank you for watching my videos. Like and comment below, and please don't forget to comment the answer to this question. Okay, don't cheat. And yeah, so the code for this is going to be on my GitHub. You can go ahead, all the links are going to be in the description below. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.